Hear it. That's the sound of life still choosing you. Even your thoughts feel heavy, even when the world expects too much, even when no one understands your silence, life is still flowing through you. That is not pressure, that is presence. But the world doesn't always understand that. And in those moments when the pressure grows louder than our peace, we begin to forget who we are. But you're not weak, you are not weak, you are not broken, you are not alone. Today we are not just talking about mental pressure, we are here to listen to our soul under pressure. Let us go deeper, because the signs that teach us how to handle mental pressure are not out there. They've been quietly living with you this whole time. When your life gets too loud, when your mind feels like a crowded room full of shouting voices, pressures from work, the pressure of simply existing in a world that demands constant performance, there comes a point where the noise inside becomes heavier than the noise outside. And in that moment, the world expects you to fight back with action, with words, with explanations. Silence is not a sign of defeat, it's not weakness, it's not surrender. Silence is where the real strength lies, it's where transformation begins. You see, in today's world, silence is uncomfortable for most people. We fill every pause with music, notifications. Silence forces us to face ourselves. It strips away the noise and leaves only the truth, and truth is not always easy to face. But in the practice of Bhajan Marg, in the journey of the soul, silence is divine. Silence is not empty, it is full of answers. When pressure builds up like a storm, silence becomes your umbrella, not to escape the rain, but to walk through it in peace. Imagine a moment you're already up, and before you've even had a chance to breathe, your phone is buzzing, deadlines, messages. Reminders, expectations. Scattered, your emotions frazzled, someone says something unkind, you feel the heat rise in your body, you want to lash out, but to explain, you want to defend yourself. But instead you pause, you breathe, and you choose the silence, and not the silence of suppression. Not that every pressure is a voice, or not that every pressure needs a performance. You are not obligated to carry the weight of every emotion that visits your mind. There's a story of a monk who once walked into a river every morning at sunrise. He would stand still, eyes closed, without moving. He said, I am learning how not to react. I am learning to listen to the silence in my soul. But that silence will teach me how to respond to the noise of the world. This is not just spiritual poetry. This is real. Imagine applying this in your own life. When someone says something hurtful, you went through trees. When your mind starts racing with anxiety, instead of running faster, you sit in stillness and anchor yourself. When the world says, prove yourself, you let your peace become your proof. In your silence, it's often the echo and imperfection and fearing and judgment, chasing validation. But when you step into silence, you give yourself permission to just be. No performance. No masters, the raw and full truth of who you are in that moment. It gives you space to open the window to higher wisdom, because while pressure screams, silence whispers. And those whispers are where your real power lives. Even in relationships, silence can be healing. When two people are in conflict, words often become weapons. But a pause, a breath, in the same way when you're over at work, instead of reacting with panic or frustration, stepping away into a moment of silence can bring clarity that no meeting or memo could ever provide. You start to see that silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of peace. It's the strength to pause when everything inside you explodes. It's the choice to stay centered when your thoughts are pulling you in 1,000 directions. And slowly you'll find that mental pressure no longer controls you the way it used to. You become the observer, not the reactor. And when the world wonders why you're so calm, how you become so stable, you'll know the answer, because you discovered the sacred power of silence. And now silence is no longer your escape, it's your home. In fact, it often reveals something deeply right. It's easy to think that pressure means you're failing, that you're falling behind, or that you're not strong enough to handle life. But pause for a moment. What if the pressure you feel is actually a sign of how deeply you care? You don't get anxious about things that don't matter to you. If your mind is racing at night, if your chest feels heavy in the middle of the day, if you're constantly trying to do more, be more, fix everything, it's because your soul is engaged. That pressure is not proof of your weakness. If any of your growth, your dreams, your relationships, that care is what creates the tension. And that care is sacred. Think of a mother staying up late worrying about her child. The mental pressure she feels is not a flaw, it's love and motion. Because they want to make their parent right. Or the man who carries the burden of providing for his family. Or the young girl who feels the pressure to succeed because she wants to change her destiny. That pressure that because they are alive to something meaningful. Something to avoid that stress is a curse. But in the Bhajan Marg way of thinking, pressure is not the enemy, it's an invitation. An invitation to look at what your heart is holding tightly. When you feel overwhelmed, don't just fight the feeling, ask yourself. Get a connection with your people values. Imagine a man working a job here that he shows up every day, not for the paycheck alone, because he wants to give his children a better life. That mental pressure is born from his silent sacrifice. Feel free not for ego, but because she knows she's breaking generational patterns of limitation. In both cases, pressure becomes purpose. The real problem is not the pressure itself, it's when we forget the reason behind it. Then you reconnect with the source. But when you reconnect with the source, when you remember why you started, pressure becomes fuel. It pushes you forward, not down. Every artist, every monk, every teacher, every leader, everyone who's ever done anything meaningful has felt pressure. So like throw them, you can destroy them. You can do the same in observing your mental not as a threat, but as a teacher. Let's say you're overwhelmed by responsibilities. Instead of spiraling into frustration, sit quietly and say to yourself, I want to grow. Feel how that changes the energy. Instead of resisting the pressure, you begin to soften to it. You begin to understand it. Even in spiritual practices, mental pressure can arise. You may feel like you're not meditating enough, not praying enough. You desire to align with some higher. Don't let that desire turn into guilt. Let it become grace. You are not perfect and you're not meant to be. You are devoted and that is enough. When you realize that pressure is a reflection of your care, you no longer shame yourself for feeling it. Punish you. Slowly, pressure transforms from something that crushes you to something that builds you. This shift in awareness doesn't eliminate pressure, but it redeems it. It allows you to carry the weight without collapsing under it. So the next time you feel mental pressure, before you judge it, before you wish it away, look at it with new eyes. Ask yourself, what does this pressure say about what I value, who I want to create in this world? And then whisper to yourself gently. Be your peace in the midst of the pressure. The mind has a voice and so does the soul, but they don't speak the same language. The mind shouts, it panics, it creates stories, plays scenes that haven't happened yet, replays memories that have already passed. In moments of attention, the voice of the mind becomes so loud, so consuming that it drowns out everything else. You begin to believe it, you begin to think that its panic is your truth. But the soul whispers, the soul never forces, never yells. Your voice is stillness, buried underneath the noise, patient only than you need. But you can only hear it when you learn to listen differently. You've probably experienced this contrast in your own life. Imagine you've made a mistake at work or in school. Your mind starts yelling, you're not good enough. Why can't you ever get things right? The pressure builds, your heart races. You feel negative, sit with it. If you step away from the moment, take a walk, close your eyes and breathe. Somewhat deep within the soul says something very different. That's the whisper. And it's always there. It's just quieter than the storm in your head. This is why learning to hear the whisper of your soul is essential to handling mental pressure. Because the mind often reacts with fear, but the soul responds with truth. Pushes you to prove yourself. The soul reminds you that you already belong. Every day we are faced with moments where the pressure tightens its grip. Someone criticizes you, you don't meet your goals. Life feels uncertain. And in those moments, the mind will scream. It will throw darts at you. If you pause, even for a few seconds, you will start to sense the quieter presence beneath it. Oh, it might come as a soft reminder you've made it through worse, or a feeling this is uncomfortable. There's an after, but it's not even a question. The soul speaks in these subtle ways. Through feelings, through breath, through calm. It never rushes, it never panics. Because the soul knows what the mind forgets, that you are more than pressure, that you are more than your pressure, you are more than your worst day. You are more than your loudest thoughts. But silence itself is not empty, it is full of wisdom. Have you ever sat in the early morning before the world wakes up or walked alone through nature? In those moments, there's no external noise. Yet something inside feels alive, grounded, still. That's your soul speaking. And that's usually the mind, but just because it's not, doesn't mean it's right. The loudest voice is not always the truest voice. And the moment you realize this, you begin to regain your inner power. You begin to say, yes, I hear you. You begin to feel pressure, but I will not let it define you. You begin to turn inward, not to escape life, but to face it with clarity. This is a practice. It doesn't happen overnight. But each time you pause before reacting, each time you take a breath before making a decision, whisper becomes you to recognize. You begin to trust it becomes your compass. In relationships, this matters deeply. When someone you love hurts you, the mind will scream, defend yourself, push them away. But the soul might whisper, listen. Decision making, the mind says, pick the safe option, don't risk anything. But the soul might gently say, trust your desire, you were made for more. Again and again, this contrast appears in daily life. Who learn to listen beyond them. They don't ignore pressure. They don't pretend it's not there, but they know it's not the whole truth. They know there is a deeper, quieter voice, one that leads not with fear, but with love. One that says, keep going. You're screaming under the weight of pressure. Don't fight it. Just step back and ask yourself, what is the soul whispering to me right now? Because sometimes all you need is not a louder voice, but a truer one. And that voice is already within you, waiting to be heard. We hold on to control, to outcomes, to expectations, clenching our minds like fists trying to shape life into what we think it should be. But here is the quiet truth. Most people never pause to understand. The more tightly you hold on, the heavier it gets. But when you let go, I'll give up, but truly let go, you begin to rise. Letting go does not mean it means you stop carrying. It means you stop trying to force everything into your plan. You stop believing the lie that peace can only come when everything is perfect. Real peace is born in surrender, and that surrender is not weakness, it is strength wrapped in wisdom. Take a simple example from daily life. Picture someone stuck in traffic on their way to an important meeting. Their hands are clenched on the steering wheel, heart racing, but the cars don't move, the road is still blocked. What has all that mental pressure achieved? Nothing but inner chaos. But now imagine that same person taking a breath, accepting the reality of the moment and choosing to shift focus. They call ahead, same traffic, same data, but a completely different inner world. Why? Because of one choice, letting go. Now take it deeper. Imagine a person in a relationship that feels strained. They've tried everything, explaining themselves, fixing the other person, overthinking every word. They've convinced themselves that if they just try harder, the pressure will disappear, but it doesn't. Because the pressure isn't just about the other person, it's about the internal grip on need to control the outcome. Now imagine if instead they said, I've done my part. Follow it. The peace that follows is not from the situation changing, it's from the internal release. You see, we often believe that holding on shows strength, but in reality, letting go shows trust. But letting go is an act of spiritual intelligence. It's saying to life, spiritual practice, people pressure to be perfectly calm, perfectly disciplined, perfectly aligned. They hold on to the rituals as if missing one day will undo all progress. But spirituality was never meant to be pressure. It was meant to be a pathway to peace. In the quiet letting go control and the deep trusting of divine flow, letting go means you're not trying to manipulate time. You're not trying to rush you or what to control, how people see you or what the future holds. It means you've shifted your energy from fear to faith. Because life suddenly gets easier, but because your relationship to life transforms, there's a reason why rivers, for they don't resist the rocks, they move around them, they punt to any one direction, they find their own path. When you let go, you become like that river. But no longer stuck in the struggle of resist. And the beauty is this, the moment you let go is often the moment something better begins. It's when clarity comes. When new opportunities reveal themselves, when healing starts, they're open to receive what for his own life. So in your mind, gripping so tightly that it's becoming a source of pressure, is it a job, a relationship, a goal, a fear, a version of yourself you're afraid to outgrow? Then breathe, not to escape, but to release. Even the sun says, each day, trusting will rise again. This is your invitation, let go to grow. Not everything you lose a lot. Sometimes letting go is how you finally find yourself again. And in that release, mental pressure loses its grip. The second day with every day, yet most of us do without awareness. We breathe to survive, but we rarely breathe to heal. We inhale and exhale mechanically, never realizing that the very breath we overlook holds the power to calm the storm within us. Your mind races, your chest tightens, your tongue tangle. It's not always answers you need. Sometimes you just need to come back to your breath. And not just any breath, but the kind of breath that feels like a conversation with the divine. When you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or scattered, not just as an act of survival, but as an act of surrender, inhale peace, exhale fear. Inhale strength, exhale doubt. With each breath, you're not only feeding your lungs, you're feeding your soul. Have you ever watched a baby sleep? They breathe deeply, slowly, with their whole body. That's not a technique that they learned. That's the natural rhythm of a soul that hasn't yet been burdened by the pressures of life. But somewhere along the way, we begin to live in our minds instead of our bodies. We breathe shallow, we lie fast, we carry tension without release. Bad breath. Mental pressure is often not just emotional or situational, it's physiological. When we're stressed, our breathing becomes short and shallow. Our nervous system stays on high alert. We stay locked in survival mode. Begins to calm. Your thoughts slow down. Your body softens. You create space mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's not magic. It's a biology working in harmony with spirituality. Let's say you're in the middle of a stressful day. Your to-do list is unfinished. You feel your shoulders tensing, your mind spinning. In that moment, instead of trying to push through, escape the pressure, you stop. You close your eyes. You take a deep breath. And then you let your exhale be longer than your inhale. Suddenly, this is a spiritual leaf technique. This is a spiritual practice. In Bhajan Marg, every breath is seen as a whisper from the divine, a sacred rhythm that reminds you are still here, you are still connected, you are not alone. When saints and sages meditate or chant, because each inhale is a receiving and each exhale is a release. And when you learn to breathe like this, not just with your body, but with your awareness, you begin to regulate not just your emotions, but your energy. When everything around you is failing, it's a raga, act of presence. It's saying, I will not be swept away by the chaos. I will anchor myself in something deeper. Sometimes people wait for their situation to change before they allow themselves to relax. They think, but the truth is you'll never fully control everything. Peace does not come from controlling. Life comes from connecting to something steadier than life's ups and downs. That steadiness begins with your breath. You don't need a mountain. You don't need a retreat just for a few moments throughout your day. Before you enter a meeting, after a tough conversation, while sitting in traffic, when your heart feels heavy, let your breath be your guide back home to yourself. And the more you do this, the more natural it becomes. You make decisions from peace, not panic. Your breath becomes your anchor. Your shield you offer, there's a quiet kind of power in this, a holy simplicity. You don't have to shout to be strong. You don't have to fight to find your way. Sometimes you just have to breathe deeply, fully, the pressure. Because your breath is more than oxygen. It is a sacred rhythm. A reminder that no matter what you're facing, peace is always just one breath away. Not in panic, but in truth, in softness, in surrender. Because the weight we carry in silence often becomes the loudest noise inside us. And mental pressure left unspoken multiplies in the shadows of our own mind. That vulnerability is weakness. That sharing what we're going through makes us a burden. So we smile when we're breaking. We say, oh, I'm fine, when our spirit is screaming. And in that quiet suppression, mental pressure begins to suffocate our joy, our clarity, our peace. It makes you brave. Think about a time when you were overwhelmed, life was too fast, emotions were too heavy, and thoughts were spinning like a storm in your head. Now think about how that changed even slightly. Maybe they didn't have the perfect words, maybe they just listened. But even that moment of release created space in your heart again. It gave your pain a place to breathe instead of burying it deeper inside. In Bhajan Marg tradition, community, heart-to-heart connection. Why? Because being around others who hold sacred space, who listen without judgment, who remind you that you're not alone, that becomes a balm for the wounded soul. When mental pressure feels too big to handle alone, it's also about talking to people. It's also about talking to the divine. When the weight gets too heavy, sometimes the most profound relief comes not from solving the problem, but from whispering it to the one who understands you without explanations. That kind of vulnerable expression becomes a doorway to peace. Even journaling your thoughts can be powerful. Taking pen and paper and writing out the chaos in your mind gives it form. It makes the formless storm visible, and suddenly you realize it's not as monstrous as it felt. Slowly, clarity rises from daily life, gives us moments where expression becomes a lifeline, like a mother silently crying in the kitchen while her family eats dinner, thinking no one sees her struggle. Like a student sitting in an exam hall, overwhelmed, the stress of work home every night, smiling in meetings but die inside. These are real moments. And the healing begins when they speak up, not complain, but to release. A simple conversation can be sacred when it comes from the heart. You don't need fancy words. This honesty is not weakness, it's wisdom. Because carrying your storm alone only feeds it. When you share, the storm begins to pass. And let's be clear, not everyone deserves access to your vulnerability. Choose wisely. Speak to those who honor your heart. Because one day they explode in anxiety, irritability, or illness. But when you give those emotions a safe place to be seen, heard, and released, they lose their power over you. You're not created to live life in silence. You're not designed to carry every burden alone. Soon you come to give the permission to do the same. Become a light in a world where too many suffer quietly. So if mental pressure has been building, if your mind is tired and your heart is heavy, ask yourself this: who can I speak to? It could be a friend, a mentor, or it could simply be your own reflection in the mirror as you say, this is hard, but I'm not giving up. Even the divine listens when no one else does. You can pour your soul into prayer, into song, into the silence of the night. Your expression doesn't need an audience. It just needs your permission. To release, you invite light into the darkness, and slowly the pressure fades, replaced by peace that flows not from pretending everything is okay, but from finally admitting what is not, and trusting that's where the healing begins. Thoughts clashing, emotions overwhelming, and silence becomes louder than any noise. You could be surrounded by people, yet could feel completely alone in your inner war. But one of the most underrated keys to handling mental pressure is this. This advice might feel counterintuitive. Do more, but it's exactly what your soul needs. Because when mental pressure mounts, it's usually not just about the situation you're in. It's about the hundreds of imagined outcomes your mind is projecting at once. It's busy worrying about the exam, the future job, the expectations of parents, the competition, the failure he hasn't even faced yet. All of that at once. His shoulders slump, his chest tightens, he can't breathe. the following. Imagine if you just paused, took a deep breath, and focused only on the next paragraph, not the next chapter, not the exam, not the result, just the next line on the page. And the next, that's how the mountain becomes climbable, one small step at a time. Sometimes the constant overthinking, the need to control everything, the guilt of resting, the obsession with timelines. But when you bring yourself back to the present moment, everything begins to soften. In Bhajan Marg teachings, great emphasis is placed on being present in the now. He's got now. And in this now, you're safe. You're breathing. You're here. Just here. One inspiring story comes from a woman who's caring for a sick mother. She felt overwhelmed. Managing work, hospital visits, medications, sleepless nights. If she doesn't recover, what if I mess up something important, if I'm not strong enough? Until one evening, sitting by her mother's bed, her mom squeezed her hand and said, "Thank you for sitting with me," just that. And the woman realized this moment is all that matters. And peace flooded in. When your mind starts racing, slow it down by anchoring yourself to what you can see, touch, hear, smell. I feel the breath entering and leaving your body. Sip warm tea and notice the flavor. Speak to yourself with kindness, saying, becomes a shield against mental pressure. Let's take a daily life example. A young man trying to build his business. There are bills. There is competition. There is a rejection. For every day he wakes up with a tight chest because his mind immediately jumps to, what if this month I fail? Today, what one task can I complete with focus and sincerity? That shift doesn't remove all problems, but it calms the mind, sharpens the action, and builds confidence moment by moment. Taking one moment at a time is not about denial. It's about choosing not to drown away everything at once, because clarity is born in the present. Peace is planted in the now. And when you honor the now, your future gets shaped with greater strength and intention. Even spiritual practices reflect this wisdom. When you sit for meditation, you're simply breathing, returning to stillness. That's how the mind is healed, not by force, but by presence. So you're feeling the crushing weight of mental pressure. Pause and ask yourself, what's the next right thing I can do? Not 10 things. Not tomorrow's list. Maybe it's replying to that you've been dreading. Maybe stepping outside and feeling the sunlight on your skin. These moments seem small, but they carry power. They create rhythm. They anchor you back to life. You see, your journey doesn't have to be perfect. You stop fearing the future and start trusting the process. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's how you rise, not by leaping over everything, but by standing in now again until peace becomes your second nature. In the end, ease when your mind learns how to rest in the present. So choose presence, choose now, and let each moment carry you forward with quiet strength.